Hey, what's up, coach? If you are using content or social media to try and get clients, and every time you pull up your phone or check your email or open your social media, you feel like you're getting a 404 error, like no dream clients are anywhere to be found, I'm making this video for you. I used to struggle a lot with content, whether it was getting started and just gaining that first idea that I was willing to put out in the world, or hey, what's up, coach? If you are using content or social media to try and get clients, and you feel like every time you open your phone or your email or your social media, and you feel like you're getting a 404 error, like dream clients not found, you're not finding any clients anywhere, this video is for you. I used to struggle a lot with content, whether it was just like coming up with the ideas or being consistent or even getting clients. And so I'm going to share with you what I do now that I use to help attract people to me, attract my people, to nurture their belief over time, and then also to reap a harvest of dream clients. And I'm going to share this coming from a framework that I've personally used to help other coaches generate over $30 million in the last 4 years and have practically an unlimited supply of ideas. And no, not from AI. So you want to stick around for this. Now, I want to kind of set this up a little bit. I want you to think of your message, to think of your content, whatever message you're putting out there, whatever ideas or stories you're going to talk about as seeds. And here's why. When we are working on content, you have to have a certain mindset of it in order to be in this game for the long term and really reap a harvest of clients from your content, because content is very different. It's an inbound game, right? You're trying to attract people into you. It's not the outbound game like you do when you're first starting a business and you got a warm audience and you find your contacts in your phone or your email or your social media and you send message out to them, right? We're trying to get people to come to us through content. Although it does go both ways. I'm not going to touch on that too much, but when we're talking about content, we're trying to draw people to us. Um, you have to think of yourself as the messenger. You have to put on this mindset of someone who is a sower, who sows seeds. And if you've ever heard of the parable of the sower from the Bible, it's in chapter 13 of Matthew. I'm just going to read it to you quick because I got my Bible here. It says, again, we're in chapter 13, Matthew chapter 13, verses 3 through 9. Jesus told them many things in parables. In one of them, he said, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. Now, maybe you've heard this before, but this idea from the Bible about when you share the good news of the gospel with people, you're sharing that message, and sometimes that message will land on fertile soil, right? And you will see fruit from it. But sometimes it won't. Sometimes there might be like a little bit of growth and then it'll be snatched away or it'll be choked out or it'll never grow at all. Well, your message with your business, whatever coaching business you have, and the good news that you're trying to bring to the world through your coaching business is very much like that. You are the sower and you are sowing a seed. Okay. And about a month ago, I was at this really amazing intensive with a bunch of other high level entrepreneurs, and just I went there with this mindset of trying to think like maybe what I need to take away from this is finding the right connection, right? Like maybe I need to meet someone and that's what's going to, help things for me. Or maybe I'm going to learn some type of strategy that's really going to blow things up, and growth is just going to be amazing. And what happened was very different from that. My wife was with me, and we had kind of gotten done with the session for the day. And so we were going out to just do some relaxation stuff. And so everybody was down on these yoga mats. And as I was laying there, my wife tapped my arm and she said, "Look at this. Look at your yoga mat." And so I flipped over and I looked at this. There was this message on my mat and it said, "Trust the seeds you are planting." And so immediately, like that hit me to my core because I was in this period of, I'm planting a lot, right? I'm trying to share my message and share it in a certain way. And I felt as if there was something that I was missing. But the truth is, I just needed to trust the seeds that I was planting, trust God with those seeds. And what that practically meant for me was to detach from the outcome, right? The sower who sows the seed doesn't have a whole lot of influence on whether that seed's going to grow, right? But when we detach from the outcome and we connect with the one who creates the outcome, God, then some really great things can happen. It can free us up to sow more, right? To put more content out there, to share our message more and have more conviction. There's actually a verse that talks specifically about this. It's in 1 Corinthians 3:7. And it says, "I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth." And so when you come into this game of content with that mindset of you are a sower, you are a messenger, your job is to scatter the seed, to put it out there, to plant it, to sow it, but not to have the growth. It helps you realize that you don't have a whole lot of control, but you also don't need a whole lot of control because all your job is to do is to put the content out there to sow that seed. And so I'm going to share with you something that I personally use. It's my exact content framework. It's how I approach content, basically from like start to finish. And I hope this will give you an idea of what works for me so that you can find something that works for you. Okay, now I am going to show you a little bit of drawing. Again, I call this my seed to sow content cycle because we're talking about seeds. Your seeds are your ideas, your messages, your stories that you want to put out there. And so the first thing that you need to do is spot. And pardon my writing because I should get one of those like little pen things, the styluses, but I don't have one. I got my finger. So this is the best I got for now. The first step is to spot, right? You need to spot a seed. And really this just comes down to noticing things, right? Like you're going about your day, you're having experiences, you're with your family, you're working, you're having client calls, whatever it is that you're doing. And you've probably had this before where you get an idea, right? Or you're reading and you see a message somewhere and you're like, "Oh, that really hit home with me." Or you hear a story somewhere on a podcast or in a book or a friend's telling you it. And all of a sudden you have this idea, right? Spotting the seed is simply noticing that idea and acknowledging like, "Oh, there's maybe something to that." Okay. That's the first step is just being aware, right? Being conscious of all the things that are going on around you, paying closer attention to things. Now, once you spotted an idea, the next thing that you need to do is store it. In the Bible, Joseph, he was in this period of time where there was going to be a famine coming up, and so what he did was he stored a bunch of grain. Right, he stored it in his storehouse so that when they needed it, they could come back and get it. Right. Sometimes you get, I don't know about you, but sometimes I get ideas at really weird times. Right, like maybe I'm sitting in church and the pastor says something. I'm like, "Oh, I got this great idea from that," or it sparked something in me. I'm not going to make a post right now, right? Or you're in the shower or whatever you're doing, and it's just not a convenient time. So that's why you need to store those ideas, store those seeds, because sometimes those seeds shouldn't be planted right away either, right? Maybe they need time to mature. Maybe they need time to dry out, to sit a little bit so that you can mull it. Maybe they're not fully flushed out. You don't have a completely clear idea, but you know you've got like a sliver of something there, right? So you need to store it. I'm going to show you real quick what my content storehouse looks like. I just have it on my notes app on my phone. These are tons of different ideas that I have, and I could go here and I could scroll through this and scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, and I have so many ideas that I have put in here in my storehouse, my content storehouse, so that when I'm ready to create some content, I can come back to it. Okay, so you could use a notes app, you could use a notebook, you could use a Google Doc, whatever you need to do to have a place where you store all of those seeds, those ideas, those messages that you want to put out there. Now, once you've stored them, from time to time, especially when you're ready to create some content, the third thing that I do is I sift. And you've probably experienced this maybe when you were younger. Like if you ever went to those I don't even know like what they would be called, but those events where you see like what people who used to dig for gold and mine for gold used to do, right? They would sift. They would put a bunch of sand or whatever from the riverbed inside these little trays that have a bunch of tiny tiny holes in them, and they would sift all the sand out, and what's left is the good stuff, right? This is what you need to do with your ideas, because not every idea is good, right? Some ideas that we get are whispers from the enemy. They're things that we don't want to plant, right? We don't want more of that to grow. A lot of the ideas that we get are good. Some of them are not, though. And so we need to use discernment to sift those ideas. And I kind of have two standards that I look at. One of them is, because I'm a Christian, I want all of my messages to align with God as much as possible. And if they don't, I throw them out, right? I discard them. But that's the first one. The second one is they have to align with my what I call my gospel message, my good news message for my business. And you can think of that as, your business, you're bringing something good to someone, right? You're trying to help them experience a transformation. And there's a specific, like core message that you have in your business. I call that my gospel message. And I have a very specific framework that I follow to create that gospel message. And so that any of these ideas that I have, first and foremost, they need to align with God and the Bible. But second, they also need to align with my gospel message for my business. If they don't, I throw them out, because that's what I use to help make sure that all of my messaging stays aligned, right? If you look on any of the social platforms I have, my Facebook, my Instagram, that kind of stuff. I don't even really use Instagram a whole lot, but YouTube, email, like all of my messages always tie back to this core gospel message that I have for my business. So if I use that as my filter to sift out those seeds, to sift out those content ideas, it's going to help me make sure that everything stays true to who I am. And it's going to make it really clear for the people who are consuming my content to know what I'm about and to know where I'm leading them and to determine whether or not I'm the right person for them. I'm the right coach for them, right? Now, the last step is, once you have sifted those ideas and you're left with a bunch of good ones, you need to pick which one you want to use, right? And you need to plant it. And that's where sow comes in. And so one of the things that I do, I want to just jump back for a second, is one of the processes that I use when I'm sifting things, and how I actually figure out, like, does this align with God? Does it align with the Bible or not? I like to pray over those ideas and just see if there's any that jump out to me, any that I kind of feel a nudge that I should use. And that's one of the most important things that I do. But another thing that I do is, if I have a content idea that I feel is really good, but I'm not 100% sure on it, is maybe I'll connect with one of my mentors about it, right? And kind of run the idea by them. Those are some actual practical methods that I use, in addition to, reading my Bible and just using my knowledge and the wisdom that I've gained to know whether or not something aligns, and also making sure that it aligns with that core gospel message that I have, to figure out, is this a seed that I should sow? Now, when you get to this point and you're ready to sow, you're ready to, like, you've got an idea, you've got a seed, and you're like, okay, this is a good one. I want to plant this. There's a couple things that you need to do, right? You need to figure out, where am I going to sow this idea? And where do you sow seeds, right? You sow them in fields. And there's essentially three different kinds of fields that you can sow in, right? I like to refer to them, they're like three different audiences, right? You put your message in front of an audience, you sow a seed in a field. So there are three different types of fields. The first field is one that you build, right? This is your own field. So if you think of this as your social media, right? It's an audience that you have, your email list, your YouTube subscribers, any channel that you own, or that you have an audience with, and they're your audience, they're following you. That's one of the fields that you can sow in, is one that you build. Another field that you can sow in is one that you borrow. Now, a field that you borrow would be something that you're collaborating with somebody else on, right? Maybe you're both speakers at an event, right? And you invite your audiences to the event and you get to present in front of their audience, they get to in front of yours, right? It's not something necessarily that you pay for. Maybe you're guest speaking somewhere. Maybe you're making a guest blog post. Maybe you're posting inside of their Facebook group, or you're doing something else where you're not exchanging money for it, but you get to put your message in front of their audience, right? You're borrowing their field. They're letting you plant your seed, your message in their field. Okay. That's the second way. And then the third way is to buy. So this again is someone else allowing you to use their field to plant your seed, to put your message in front of, but this time you have to pay for it, right? That's like running ads, doing influencer shout outs, that kind of thing, right? Now, this just helps you get an idea of what audience am I going to put this message out into, right? Like what audience am I going to put it in front of? Okay. Once you know that, now you can think about how do I actually need to frame this idea? How do I need to expand it into something that is actually cohesive, right? That makes sense and that does whatever the point of your message is to do. And so I want to share with you kind of one of the things that I like to think about when I'm creating a message and considering putting it out there into the world. And it's this idea of the contrarian way. You've probably heard me talk about this before. It's what my entire business is built off of. And um, it's this framework that I codified it during one of the most like humbling periods of my life. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on. Life kind of felt like it was blowing up, like everything from health to finances to relationship stuff, like everything felt like it was on fire, and none of it was something that I could control, right? And so it was at that point in my life that I just asked God, like, what do I do? What do I do? Especially from the financial standpoint, one of the big significant things that happened is I lost a huge portion of our income, like 2 weeks before our second born was going to arrive, and we had all these different things that we were in the middle of, and so I was trying to look at things through this financial lens, this business lens. Like, how can I fix this issue that came up? And over the period of time, God showed me as I read the Gospels. I was reading about Jesus's life. I had my business goggles on, and I'm trying to figure out, like, is there any way? I know that this is applicable to life in general, right? It's the Bible, but how can I apply it specifically to my business? And one of the things that I noticed as I went through there and was reading about Jesus's life, there was a pattern in how he communicated with people and helped them experience transformation. And it took me a little bit to figure out, like, how can I really simplify this into something that makes sense. And that's when I codified this into what I call the contrarian way. Now, there's a macro version of it, which is how I run my entire business, but there's also a micro version of it, and that's what I'm going to share with you, because that applies specifically to how you create content. Okay. Now, the contrarian way is 3 different parts. The first part is belong, right? When you look at the way Jesus communicated with people, he always made sure that they felt like they belonged. Like, he knew who his audience was that he was talking to, right? And pretty much any story that you look at, like, Jesus knew the person deeply. The woman at the well is a really great example. So is Zacchaeus. Like, he knew these people. And when you're creating a message, one of the things that you need to do is help people feel safe, to feel known, to feel loved, to feel understood, right? That's what builds that initial connection. And there's a ton of different ways that you can do that. Jesus did it in so many different ways. Sometimes he would ask questions. Maybe he would tell a story that people could relate to. He would address an emotion or like some sort of pain that they were dealing with. He would show empathy. Like, there's so many different ways. But he did that to build that connection, because once that connection is made, then people's ears open up to actually hear what you have to say. And that's what leads you to the second part, which is believe. The second part of the contrarian way is believe. And this is about shifting beliefs. Now, lots of marketers, lots of salespeople talk about shifting beliefs, but what they rarely tell you is how and what do you shift that belief to. One of the things that I firmly believe is, there's this idea that people have false beliefs, which is that's an actual thing. People believe lies all the time. The enemy is whispering in their ear. They believe things about God or about themselves or about the world, and they're just not true. And so when we're trying to shift their beliefs, are we shifting from a false belief to another false belief? Or like, what exactly are we shifting them to? And contrarians always shift people from a false belief to a true belief that is aligned with Scripture. And that is very important. When you look at Jesus, everything that he did, whether he was teaching, different ways that he created belief, he would teach people, he would give an analogy, he would quote scripture. In the Sermon on the Mount, he would talk about lies that people have heard or that have been told to them, and then he would give them the actual truth. He would provide evidence, right? Testimonies, proof, miracles, all that sort of stuff, right? And so all of that helped people to be able to believe, to shift from that false belief to the new belief, right? That's what you need to do as a second kind of core piece in every piece of content that you have. If you look throughout Jesus's teachings, the way he communicated with people, this is something he did. He helped align them with the truth. And then the last thing is, he didn't just leave them there, right? Like, you can know the truth, but you need to do something with it. And so that's where this last piece, become, comes into play. Now, become is all about helping them to actually walk in that truth. It's an offer, it's an invite for them to take whatever that next step is, right? It might be like a super low friction call to action. Like, comment below, leave a like, send me a message or something if you resonate with this. It might be something a little bit deeper, like go check out this video, or check out something that takes a little bit more time and intention to consume. Maybe it's try something, like maybe you taught something in the belief portion of your content that you want them to apply right away. Or maybe it's just opening a door to a conversation, whatever that next step in your funnel is. That's what become is about. And that's how you can structure every single message that you put out. Now, it doesn't always have to be in this order. If you read through the way Jesus communicated in the Bible, it wasn't always belong, believe, become, right? Sometimes it was a different order, but the vast majority of the times you would be able to identify that he knew who he was talking to. There was belonging, there was connection. He knew what belief he was shifting, right? He's creating conviction in a belief. And then he knew and he gave that next step. He invited them into something different, right? Connection and conviction, and then conversion, right? Actually walking in that newness. Now, like I said, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do each of these things within your content, creating belonging and creating belief, shifting someone into a true belief, and helping them to become someone new, to actually walk that out. And one of the beautiful things about this is that when you follow this, when you apply the seed to sow content cycle, and you have an idea, one that you want to plant, that you want to put out there, and you apply this framework of belong, believe, become, and there's so many different ways to create belonging and create belief and invite someone to become someone new, that you essentially have an unlimited supply of ideas, of content ideas. There's so many different ways that you can frame the exact same idea. Now, I'll give you an example of this. If you look in the Bible, there's this place where Jesus tells this story about the parable of the mustard seed. And he's describing the kingdom of heaven and how it starts small and then it grows into something that's bigger. And shortly after that, he tells another parable, the parable of the yeast. It's the same exact goal, the same exact idea, to help people understand how the kingdom of heaven works and grows, but he's using two different angles. They're two different stories, but they have the same point, right? That's what it looks like to shift the angle of your content. So maybe you're teaching something in one angle, and the other angle, maybe you're providing evidence, right? It's using the same idea, the same seed that you had, but it's using a new angle on it. And that allows you to create multiple pieces of content. And when you do that with each of those different pieces, belong, believe, become, and all the different ways that you can apply each of those, you can have an unlimited supply of content. And that's only with one idea, right? If you looked at, my content storehouse, and I got all these different ideas here that I can use for whatever, all of those ideas, I can get the point of those ideas across in so many different ways. So repurposing your content by shifting the angle slightly is one amazing way that you can create a ton of content that's on point. It gets the message across, but it does it in a different way so that you're not always feeling like you're saying the same thing over and over and over, right? But you're still getting the core message across. The other thing that's really neat is that when you take this approach, another way that you can repurpose your content is by length. And the reason that that is super useful is because platforms change, right? Maybe you're speaking at an event, or maybe you're talking in an elevator with somebody, or maybe you're making a short post on Facebook, or maybe you're making a YouTube video. And all those different interactions that you have, you've got a different amount of time that you have to get that message across, right? Some of them you might only have 15 seconds. Other ones you might have 30 minutes. Jesus did this exact same thing. If you look at this parable of the sower, this is a really great example because he taught this to a big crowd of people. He taught it kind of at a high level, right? At the end of it, you'll notice he said, "He who has ears, let him hear." He knew that not everybody was going to catch this, right? Not everybody was going to understand it. And then if you look a little bit later in chapter 13 at verse 18 through 23, Jesus explains more in depth the parable of the sower, but he does it to a different audience, to his disciples that he's got more time with, right? It's a different platform, and he's able to go deeper with those people because it's a different platform. So when you have an idea, right? When you catch an idea or a message or a story that you want to get across, and you're ready to plant it, and you format it with this framework of belong, believe, become, the same process that Jesus used to communicate with people and to help transform their lives, then you can repurpose that not only by the angle you use, telling the same story or the same concept in a different way, but also you can repurpose it by length so you can apply it to different platforms. And this, for me, this has literally helped me to have an unlimited supply of content that I know I'm never going to run out of it. Like, I have so many ideas that I get just going through life, and especially as I'm thinking about this and keeping that mindset of being a messenger and a sower and just being on the lookout, being aware for ideas as they show up. I know I'm never going to run out of ideas. But one of the things that I ran into was when you're creating content and you're trying to create so much content, it can get heavy. Like, you can feel like sometimes you're in this place where you're creating so much content that you're not able to give the amount of energy and love and support that you want to your clients. But then if you spend too much time focusing just on your clients, you're not focusing enough on spreading your message with new people. And so this problem of sustainability comes up. And one of the things that has really helped me with this is utilizing a tool that I call an AI co-laborer. Okay. Now, this isn't just like going to ChatGPT and throwing in a random prompt and like expecting to get something gold out, right? This is something that I've personally built myself and helped my clients build so that they can flush out an idea, right? You get just like a tiny little snippet of an idea that you can then turn into a cohesive message that makes sense. It sounds exactly like you because it's all coming from you. It's just organized in a way that follows the belong, believe, become framework. And it allows you to repurpose it in the different ways that you need to. And the way that I do this is through what I call a 10-80-10 flow. So the first 10% of your work with this AI co-laborer is giving a really thorough overview of what this idea or story or message that you have that you want to put out there is, right? You give it, and what I found is one of my mentors, he shared this with me, and it has stuck with me for basically forever, is he said, ideas clarify themselves as they pass through the lips and the fingertips. And what that means is when you have an idea and you start speaking it out loud or you start typing it, more and more clarity comes out of that idea as you do it, as you talk about it, as you type it out. And so when I'm talking about my message, I'll pull up like a voice conversation with my AI co-laborer and I'll just start telling whatever that little snippet of that idea is that I stuck in my storehouse. And before I know it, I've talked for like 2 or 3 or 4 minutes about this idea, none of which I had written down, but it has just started to flow out of me as I started talking about it or typing about it. And so that first 10% of that 10-80-10 flow, working with your AI co-laborer to help you format your message, is all about you and the input that you put in, right? The next 80% of it is your AI co-laborer actually doing the heavy lifting, organizing it, formatting it, making sure it sounds like you, making sure that it's easy to read, that kind of thing. And then the last 10% is a little bit more of the heavy lifting. It's the refining, just making sure that it says what you want it to say in the way that you want to say it. If as you're reading through it, you're like, wow, that's amazing. That made me think of this other thing. I want to add that in there too. Or maybe I want to change or tweak these things. That's where that last 10% comes in. And so this idea of using an AI co-laborer has really helped me to be able to consistently produce really high quality content that is all from my own ideas. I'm not getting ideas from like, searching ChatGPT or any of the other AIs and be like, what should I talk about this, right? I'm using it from my real life, from things I'm doing. I'm reading, I'm having experiences, whatever. And I'm taking those ideas, I'm flushing them out after I've sifted them and make sure they're actually an idea that I want to put there that aligns with the Bible and aligns with God and aligns with the good news, the gospel message of my business. And then I'm able to actually create that content really quickly and efficiently and make sure that it fits. It's something that I would be proud to put out there and that actually sounds like me. Okay. So then we've got all that, right? We've got the message created. We've gone through the cycle of getting an idea, of storing it, of sifting it, making sure that it's good, and then we've made the decision that we want to sow it. Now we've created the framework for the actual message, and we've used an AI co-laborer if you want. Sometimes, like a lot of times, I will still write out my own stuff, especially if it's a new idea and I do have time and get that idea in the moment. I'll write it all out. But once you have that message, you have it fully flushed out, then it's like, okay, how often am I going to do this? Like, what is my cadence for actually posting or putting content out? And my advice to you is that what works for you is probably going to be different from what works for me. What I do is I've committed to things that I've committed to producing content often enough so that I stay relevant for somebody, right? Like not that I'm always at the top of their feed, but that they see stuff and they pay attention, right? They recognize it. Sometimes they even look for it, they notice it, but also not so often that I burn out or don't have fun creating content anymore. I'm like a creative type of person, and so I love doing that, and I don't want the fun to go away from it. So I only commit to what I feel like I can sustain, and that also allows me to stay relevant. So what it looks like practically for me is I've got, one short form platform that I use. It's Facebook, and I'll usually post somewhere between 1 and 5 times a day. It just depends on the day, what I'm doing, what cool stuff I'm out doing, how much time I have for that kind of thing. With email, I'm usually sending out an email 5 to 6 times a week, just kind of depends, but 5 is my minimum. And then long form content, like, maybe maybe you're doing podcasts or blogs. For me, I'm doing YouTube videos. I'll usually do 3 to 4 of those a month. So that's essentially my whole content process, right? It's from getting an idea, from spotting a seed, all the way through actually putting that out there into the world. And the mindset that I have the whole time of being this messenger, I'm just going to put out the message consistently. I'm going to sow and sow and sow, and God's going to be the one who gives the growth. So I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to stress over it. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Now just go make some content. And if you want to go a little bit deeper on this, I did a very in-depth workshop on this. I left you something in the description, so go and check that out.